I want to go now to Dick Durbin, who's number 2 in the Democratic leadership in the Senate. He's in Springfield, as we said a while ago. Let's pick up on that health care, those remarks by Senator McCain on health care. Senator Durbin, what are Democrats going to do now?
Well, we are now considering our strategy. We have talked to the Speaker of the House of Representatives, Nancy Pelosi, about an avenue that we can follow. But for those who say, start over, let's start at the beginning. Let's do a little bit. Let's maybe do nothing, some say. I would just tell them, if we do nothing, the Medicare Trust Fund will be exhausted in 7 years. The plan we have before the Senate would extend the life of Medicare for 9 more years. If we do nothing, there'll be 57 million Americans uninsured instead of 47 million in just a few years. And the cost of the average health insurance plan for the average family of 4 will double in the next 10 years if we do nothing. That's why we think this is a serious issue.
Well, I don't think anybody would argue that it is not a serious issue, Senator Durbin. But let me just ask you this. What Senator McCain said, he said he is willing to try to get some Republicans to sit down with Democrats and see what you agree on. What would be wrong with that? Just saying, here's what's out there. We agree with this, we don't agree with that, and then just go past what you agree on. Wouldn't that be a start?
There's nothing wrong with it. But Bob, for the record, President Obama met personally with the Republican leaders in the House and Senate before this began and engaged them and asked them, be part of it. We brought them into the committee hearings. 170 Republican amendments were accepted as part of this process in both the Senate committees. We have kept the door open. We waited for months in the hopes of bringing across 3 Republican senators who expressed an early interest. So to suggest that we have closed the door to them and haven't engaged them is really not a proper statement of what's happened.
Well, clearly you're not going to get it done by the President's State of the Union speech next week, which was the original goal. When would you expect, Senator, that Democrats will be ready to bring something to the floor?
I'm not going to give you a deadline. I've seen too many of those.
Well, I mean, do you think weeks, a month? Some people say if you wait 6 weeks, like some are suggesting, you might as well just kiss the whole thing goodbye. But you...
Well, I think what we have to do is honestly sit down with our membership and decide the best course of action to move forward. The door is always open on the Republican side. We're still reaching out to try to find those who will support this. But we have to accept the obvious. This problem that we face with health care in America is one of the greatest threats to the future of our economy, not just as a nation, but as businesses and families. If we ignore this and walk away from it for whatever reason, we are going to face a crisis much, much worse in the near future. The president understands that. We would not even be in this position of taking this seriously if he hadn't shown the courage to lead us into this debate.
Let me ask you about Ben Bernanke. Do you have the votes to get him confirmed, Senator? I know you're one of the vote counters.
Well, I'm going to vote for Chairman Bernanke. I have some misgivings about Fed policy and economic policy, but I really do have to say this man guided us through the worst economic crisis this nation has seen since the Great Depression, and we are in much better shape today because of his guidance and leadership. I still have unanswered questions, and many colleagues do. We will need Republican support to make certain that we pass the cloture vote, which is a 60-vote requirement when it's taken up this next week. I think that we're going to have the votes to make sure that he is reconfirmed as chairman of the Federal Reserve.
You think, but you're not sure at this point.
Well, any whip who gives you that kind of prediction this far in advance hasn't been on the job very long, and I've been there for a while.
Senator, why do you think Scott Brown won the race in Massachusetts?
Variety of reasons. Some went right to the candidates and the campaigns, others to much larger issues. I think the independent voters in particular in Massachusetts told us, focus on the economy, focus on creating jobs. Let's see more action and more commitment in Washington than we have. I accept that verdict of history and that message. Secondly, they are frustrated by the fact that we haven't passed health care reform. Remember, Massachusetts is a state which under a Republican governor, Mitt Romney, with the support of then State Senator Scott Brown, put a mandate in for health insurance. 97 to 98% of the people in Massachusetts have health insurance. Some of them were concerned that our health care reform would diminish their state benefits. So it was a complex issue within the state of Massachusetts. But I think more than anything, the voters there said, get busy in Washington, do something about the economy.
And campaign finance. You just heard Senator McCain say that this ruling by the Supreme Court pretty much blows the lid off reform. He sees nothing that can really be done from here on in.
I joined with John McCain and Russ Feingold in supporting their campaign finance reform. It was good law, and I'm glad we did it. But banning soft money from campaigns was small in comparison to what the Supreme Court did to America this last week. I can't wait to see my Republican and conservative friends who stood up and preached against judicial activism explain this decision, which overturned 60 to 100 years of American precedent. A precedent which basically said we want to keep big business out of our campaigns in America. And now, in the name of giving free speech, this Supreme Court has allowed political extortion by big business, big oil, big banks. Think about this for a minute, Bob. We're considering a tax on the multi-million-dollar bonuses of the executives at banks who receive bailout money. Those banks can now come and say to senators and congressmen, incidentally, we want you to vote against this tax, and we're going to be big players in the next election. We're going to spend millions of dollars and reward our friends and punish our enemies. That's exactly what this Supreme Court has invited. Now, what can we do? We can demand disclosure. We can demand that those who belong to labor unions and shareholders vote before the money is spent on any political campaigns. And even more important, I'd say to John McCain, join me in a public financing effort. I've got the bill in with John Larson of Connecticut. Let's really take the reform on that many states already have started, including the state of Arizona, to make sure that every candidate of modest means has a chance to run and win.
All right. Dick Durbin of Illinois. Thank you so much, Senator. Hope to see you again.
Thanks, Bob.